disabilities. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be looking at a lot of examples both through literature and through personal experience to talk about some of the methods we can use to develop our own characters. So I think we've got electronics. Sorry about that, I'm wearing two hats today, doing announcements and the camera. Let me pull it up real quick here. Okay, final reminders. This is kind of stuff you've probably been hearing throughout the day, but we still have things going on over in the convention center on the 3rd floor. We've got our gaming, our writing, VR, virtual reality stuff that's going on over there. So go check it out. I think they're open until 6. So we've got a couple hours to go check that out if you like. Pre-registration for next year, the $40 deal ends today, so you can do that either at registration or online on our website, LTUE.net. So if you know you're coming next year, because it's the cheapest it's going to be all year, might as well take advantage of that now. Banquet tickets, if you have purchased banquet tickets, they're available to be picked up at registration as well. And then a big thank you to all of you. There would be no point in us running a convention if you guys didn't come. So thank you very much for attending. I hope you've had a good time. If you have any comments, suggestions, things you'd like to see again next year, come find somebody, Mark Towel, let us know. We would love your feedback because we're here to serve you guys. This is what we want to be doing. We want to make you guys happy. And then, other than that, I think that's pretty much everything. Yes, do you have questions? Towels? Why are the towels? Well, Life, the Universe, and Everything comes from a lovely book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it is always good to know where your towel is. If you do not know the reference, go read the book. It is awesome. Alrighty, I will turn things over to Shannon and Babb and enjoy. Hello! Welcome to Writing Characters with Disabilities. Just to give you a heads up, I am dependent on lip reading. So if you say something and you're on this side of the room, there's a very good chance that I will have no clue what you just said. So if you have questions, I love questions, raise your hand. I'm going to try to be scanning the room, so hopefully I will catch you. If not, just keep it up and wave it. Or have other people, I respond well to pointing. And we'll make the most of this presentation conversation. But before we go into that, I'd like to show you a quick video. And the sound is going to hate us on this one, but just watch the main character. So, I know we're at the end of life, the universe, and everything. Symposium. We're starting to get a little bit tired as far as brain cells go. So we are going to try to make this a little bit interactive. We just watched a video. Yes, it didn't have sound, but you got kind of the feeling of the main character in that little clip. I want you to turn to someone who is next to you and tell them why or why not you think it is a good representation of how someone who has a disability navigates their world. Was that realistic to a possible experience of someone with a disability?
Representation of the sensory bombardment that an autistic person goes through in a day-to-day life.
Okay, so from personal experience, you feel that it is similar to someone you know. Can we get, okay.
I felt like that was kind of a representation of everything. Watching that without noise kind of also helped, because that could always easily be someone who's deaf, someone who's blind, someone who has Asperger's syndrome, etc. Someone who has Asperger's, someone who's autistic. So I felt like that could probably relate to a lot of different disabilities. And maybe not every single disability, because there are a lot of disabilities, but that covered a lot of the really common big ones that I feel, yeah.
So we brought up some very good points. We can gain experience into the disability mind frame, what it's like to have a disability, by learning from those around us. And that there's a lot of different types of disabilities, but one of the things that we all have in common, regardless of our type, is we get really frustrated sometimes. The world can be really overwhelming because one of the things that makes a disability is the fact that the world is not designed for us to navigate through it easily. So, hello, my name is Shannon Babb. I am many things, but one of the things that I experience personally is That video describes what I experience on a regular basis. I deal with sensory overload, and I also deal with losing my hearing completely when I get completely overloaded with too much sensory information, oftentimes in the auditory spectrum. This is because I am diagnosed with a condition called CAPD, Central Auditory Processing Disorder. Now, we are called brain deaf, which really makes me laugh sometimes because people with CAPD usually have better hearing than the general population. It's just our brain has no clue how to make sense of all of the information we get. We have no filters. So, if you close your eyes for a moment, try to listen to everything in the environment. See how many things you can pick out. At this moment, I am listening to about 60 different items in this room. I can hear the panels on either side just as well as I can hear something in this room. Can you see why I lip read? It makes a little more sense. So this brings us to what is a disability. Disabilities are a social construct for the most part. We've got people sitting here in the mostly average group. Anyone who falls on either end, regardless of why, tends to get put in a category. So you are too, if we do this on height, you're too short. What kind of terms do we use for someone who is on the very short end of the spectrum?
Vertically challenged.
Vertically challenged.
Fun size.
Fun size.
Midget?
We have a lot of terms for being too short. Is it? Because honestly, the world is designed for average type people. Get on the other side. We get conditions like giantism. Have you ever seen a basketball player try to fit on an airplane? Are they going to fit in economy class? No, the world is not designed for someone at their perspective. So now that we've got that defined, we can now play within that definition. Because when we start looking at that spectrum and that social construct, we start realizing that when we start writing characters with disabilities, we get to explore one of the most diverse cultures on the planet. There is no type of character that you can write that can't have a disability. Although they don't have to have a disability, but writing characters with disabilities will bring one down to your writing. So we'll be looking at writing through two different lenses. We'll be doing it through literature, because there are some pretty amazing characters out there. And we'll be doing it through the eyes of someone who has CAPD, because I'm biased. In the end of this lecture, I hope that you will have a better idea of how you can kind of categorize and think about disabilities. Some of the motivations that you can use when writing characters with disabilities. Understand the basics about designing a character, and then be ready to take on the challenge of implementing that in your own writing. So, how do we categorize disabilities? In my day job, I am a scientist. And as a scientist, you are taught that human beings are obsessed with putting things into categories. There are hundreds of ways that you can categorize it, small to the big. We're going to focus on three. The first is the visible versus the invisible. Do you mind if we use you as an example? Go on. We have an example of a visible disability. We have an example of an invisible disability. Visible versus invisible tends to navigate the world a little bit differently. But that doesn't mean that the characters aren't awesome. You notice some of these, you have to love that sometimes the screen decides to not work with you. But can you spot characters that you didn't necessarily think of being disabled up there? Not Katniss. Does Katniss have PTSD by the end of the books? Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked about Sherlock Holmes before, and, that he is a high-functioning sociopath.
So we've got a whole variety. We've got autism, we've got sociopaths, and we have physical disabilities, we have giantism, we have missing limbs, we have blindness. All of these characters make their series more awesome, despite it in sometimes because of their different perspective. So, we have visible versus invisible. We have when in life it occurs. So, we tend to judge our characters different if they were born with their disability, if they got their disability midway through life, or if they have their disability due to old age. Out of these, you know the one that was the hardest to get examples of? Old age. Although, when you look at the statistics, 1 in 5 Americans deal with a disability that causes an effect on how they navigate the world. The vast majority of people, whether they think that they're going to escape and never have to deal with it in their life, will end up dealing with it eventually. It all catches up. So, when you're looking at doing a character from birth, these people generally just get used to it and deal with it and plow forward. Midlife takes a little more adjustment. They're used to living with a different perspective. Old age tend to be grumpy about it. So, then you have the length that a disability affects you. So, I threw up the American Disabilities Act. Hopefully you guys will notice much chocolate and pampering is needed for that particular disability. Pregnancy and birth is considered a disability, a short-term disability. So, you can have the temporary disabilities. A lot of you are writing disabled characters and you didn't even realize it. If it takes more than 2 weeks for them to heal, and they really can't do their job, they are considered temporarily disabled. So if they were turned into a newt and got better, they were temporarily disabled. Okay, then you have the chronic. Yeah, you have it, you learn to live with it. Then you have the terminal, which is a very real type of disability where you know it will kill you. It may take a long time, but you always have that weight hanging over your head of this disability will end my life. And again, terminal is an interesting place to play, and not many authors take it on. Okay, let's talk about some of the motivations that drive characters with disabilities. Turns out, the motivations that drive characters with disabilities are the exact same as the ones that are driving everyone else. For example, here is one of my favorite growing up disabled characters from a book. Long John Silver. When I was talking with my mom, she made the comment, well, he's not even disabled. Well, clearly he is. He just doesn't let it slow him down. He is more interested in the treasure than trying to mope about the fact he's lost a leg. In fact, you really kind of gloss over the whole reason that he lost it in the book. It's a defining part of the character. We think of pirates having peg legs because of him. But he let other motivations take center stage. But that doesn't mean that we can't use the narrative to help make some of the rest make sense. Characters with disabilities can really help us understand the desire to fit in narrative. When we look at Stuart Little, who is species challenged, we understand that his desire to fit in drives the book. Is he ever going to really fit in? Not really, but he's going to give it his darndest. We have the revenge narrative. You don't have to be disabled to do a revenge narrative, but would Captain Ahab be nearly as epic? Would we like Captain Hook nearly as much if he didn't have the revenge cat and mouse game with the crocodile? Probably not. Then we have the search for the cure narrative. If you don't have anything to cure, or at least attempt to cure, this narrative kind of falls a little flat. Can you agree with me on that? So, we've gone through kind of the definitions of disabilities. We've gone through motivations. We're going to quickly go through how to design a character, and then, unfortunately, I underestimated you guys. So we're going to have to share, we're actually going to start designing some characters of our own. So this is how I design,
What was the first narrative?
So the first narrative is they do the exact same narrative as everyone else. Then we go to desire to fit in, revenge, and search for the cure. Is there any other hands that I'm missing?
Would you agree motivation would be like chronic stuff is to be important or remembered, or would that be kind of things?
Yeah, that would be people who are not disabled still have the desire to be important and strong. And so any motivation you can give to any other character, you can hand to any character with a disability and say that is totally safe. So, ready to move on? Seeing nods, good sign. First thing, you have to identify where in the world, where in your story this particular character is going to fit in. So, you've got kind of broad characters. You've got the hero. Can anyone quickly say a hero with a disability in fiction?
Daredevil.
Daredevil. There are some really amazing characters that fit into that hero. The villain. A lot get thrown into the villain, so we should come up with at least a couple really epic. Darth Vader. The Joker.
Harley Quinn.
The Fool. The comic relief. How are people with disabilities used for a comic relief? Goonies. Goonies?
Sometimes specifically for because traditionally in Western culture, dwarfs and midgets were employed as heroes.
The Chort, if anyone knows what that is.
Okay, the sidekick. My favorite sidekick with a disability happens to be Toothless. Would we love Toothless nearly as much if we didn't have that scene where we all wanted to fix him? No. The victim. Again,
Two-faced?
that's another place where a lot of people with disabilities tend to get slotted. And then the seer, the face. Vulcan. The god Vulcan is a disabled god. You know, disabilities were going way back to the Greeks and the Romans because they gave one of their gods a disability. Now, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you don't put yourself in some of the tropes. Again, when you look at the fool, you want to be careful when you do give your fool disabilities because, as you said, that was oftentimes the only form of employment that someone with a disability could get, was making was making fun of themselves. And so that is a cultural relic that we still have. Just look at row 1. We also want to look at the victim because I'm sorry. I may hate life sometimes when I'm completely overwhelmed with sound, but I don't really feel like a victim most of the time with my disability. It's just part of who I am. So you can use those tools, but play with some of the other ones. We need some more really epic disabled heroes.
Where would you put yourself on that list?
She's a hero.
There is this saying that every villain is the hero of their own narrative. Okay, then you need to identify what type of disability. Once you have your character and where they're going to fit, what type of disability they have. Are they visually impaired? Do they have a hearing impairment? Do they have a physical impairment? Do they have a cognitive impairment? And many of those can be invisible or visible or invisible.
I'd like to point out, I have 3 of the 4, so you don't have to stick to just one.
Okay, then you need to research what it is like to have the disability, because I promise you, every book you read about being blind, unless they talk to someone who is actually blind, have no clue how blind people actually navigate the world. They also don't deal with the spectrum, the gray area of being sight impaired, because there's a whole gray area.
Again, speaking from the experiences of my sister, the autistic community both hates and loves to be featured in fiction because they love it because they want to represent it, but they hate it because it is almost always done extremely wrong. Like horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like how so in particular? I have 2 children that just got diagnosed with autism, so I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
I don't know any examples in particular. My sister would be better.
I have an example. We are emotionless. We don't care about other people's emotions at all. We don't understand them. No. Let's see. We can't understand what's going on, but we have this magic skill that makes us amazing and useful anyway. No. Lets people with a lot of different eyes and noses. So, yeah. Yeah, because I can talk right now because I can always talk.
In no one with a disability, because at some point, the vast majority of you are going to be joining the community, whether you want to or not. We're not one-dimensional people.
I notice most people here at glasses spend a day without them. Makes a huge difference. But you're still useful, you still do stuff.
You just navigate a little bit differently. We're probably not going to want to put most of you behind the wheel of a car. Okay, there's another hand in this region that is apparently going to hide.
What was the 4th thing? I got the visual, the physical, the cognitive. What was the area?
Okay. So once you've done the research, actually talk to someone who has the disability, because sometimes they'll sit and tell you, did you read that off Wikipedia? Because that has nothing to do with reality. Oftentimes, if you show real interest, you can get a walkthrough and experience something firsthand. So I have a laundry list of disabilities that I have been labeled with through the years. So I have a very particular perspective. But my most recent novel that I've been commissioned to write, one of the main characters has autism. We have some overlapping symptoms, but we do not necessarily have an overlapping perspective. So I've been working heavily with people and friends that have autism to help gain that understanding, because I can totally describe what it is like to have a complete sensory overload and that level of panic. But I don't know how my character would retreat versus how I retreat. I knit chronically as a result of my own disability, and many CAPD either are chronic doodlers or chronic knitters, because it allows us to tune out the fact that there's everything going on. So, you've done the research. It does you no good to do all this research and never write using the character. Have fun with them. Drop them off a cliff if you need to. If you have a non-disabled character and you'd like to make them a disabled character, you can drop them off a cliff too. So, I'm going to need a couple of hands in each section. We'll split it into 3. If you've got a notebook and don't want to use the sheet, then use your own notebook. We'll probably be doing this in groups, because I have like 40 copies, and you look a little bit more than that. Let me just share it.
Do you have a website where we can download this?
I did at one point. I do teach this to different groups at different times, but usually the group I'm teaching to are significantly shorter. I usually teach this to 3rd to 6th graders. I will admit, you guys hold still a whole lot better. Okay. So, while we're doing this, I'm going to give you one more video. And luckily, I know this one, even if you don't have sound, will work because it's subtitles. Because I am constantly dealing with people who say, if you read the lips, you know everything. Cool. I was posing for a picture with all of my girlfriends. Can you read my lips? Can you read her lips? My tiny loves her. She's older. Can you read her lips?
2 dogs, 1 boxer.
I'm deaf, but I'm good.
text is legible and clear.
But the human face isn't a book, and the reading isn't reading. People talk fast without loudly. People have facial hair that and people cover their mouths. People have accents. But real physicians don't think this in the studio. I'm putting together a song without all the pieces. I look in every round. I try to grasp with one sense information intended for another. There have been times when I question why I even tried to begin. The way with this wrong, when I could just use sign language. Sometimes people choose to do just that. It's like a different world. A world that is rich expression and culture. When people laugh, they come alive. But I know I won't go with words. Communication is never a given.
Tuesday, I woke up after
When I was little, my family got a cat.
that was like the last thing
I tried to I only cried twice.
But when the bleeding moves, when I focus on the bar, nurture things, and launch into a conversation, something clicks. Red burn, I feel something extraordinary. Human connection.
So, you just got to step in for a moment to a perspective of someone with a disability. Just for a moment. You now have a sheet, and if you don't have a sheet, pull out a paperwork with the neighbor. We've got some more sheets over there.
They would need them.
We are going to, I want you to take a moment to come up with a really quick character sketch. Has everyone done a quick character sketch before? So, name, gender, rough age, occupation, rough characteristics. If you are stuck on figuring out what disability to use the clip that you just watched as inspiration. Again, I kind of agree with the video. Beards are really hard to lip read through. For goodness sakes, I could not survive with dwarves. So, we're going to take just less than a minute, jot those things down, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to implement that into a story. Okay, is anyone stuck? If you are stuck, I will tell you to do the exact same thing I tell my sixth graders to do. Look at your neighbor and buzz them to tell them what they're currently doing.
Well, you never really think of it. Like my brain never gives us information or anything. It's basically how I interpret it. They have a lot of fun with the brain and it filters out.
You are very I was gonna just like an but no one else is
Is there a resource that's like, I'm sure it would be incomplete, but is there a resource of a list of disabilities that is possible to look at?
Usually you pick a sense, and actually we'll wait, and I'll go more in depth, but you'll pick a sense, and then you'll dive down on that sense.
Okay.
And then you can do research within it. What we consider the norm is a narrow niche of traits, and then you have everything else. And it's about as diverse as there are people.
I'm so curious as to how this disability of yours, if you can remember what it's called.
CAPD?
Yeah. I'm so curious as to how that works in more detail.
In a moment, we're going to have an open question, and we'll be able to dive into some of those other things.
I want to know which disabilities need more representation.
Okay. Hopefully, I am interrupting you in the middle of something important. Because if I'm interrupting you in the middle of something you're really excited about, you're going to go home and implement those characters into your stories. Because this has now gotten your interest. But we're going to want a little bit of time to answer some questions and dive into your specific wants and needs. So we're going to need to wrap this part of the presentation up first. So, including, if like Pigeon Melons, you might be dyslexic. If you have an alternative perspective of the world, it's not wrong. You just need to take the time to write it so other people can understand. That is really the foundation of disability fiction. It is help pulling back the curtain and giving people a perspective into a different way to look at the world. Okay. Most important things. We need to go into our questions. We have scary. It's only occasionally recorded. Okay, we had a question back here about where you can find resources about different types of disabilities. You can find what's off the beaten path. Because I'm sorry, I am blind from birth narrative that is the completely blind person is really overdone. So you better know what you're doing if you're going to take it on. But if you take seeing impaired and you start looking at different acuities or different disabilities that will narrow your field of vision, you will start discovering that in any category, in any sense that you dampen, that the diversity of disorders almost appears to be as diverse as the people that have them. for a reason. Disabilities are the ends of the bell curve. By definition, it's where all the strange stuff happens. And the fact that you're all writers means you hang out at the edge of the bell curve more than you like to admit. Okay, you had a question as well. Can you say your question?
Would you be willing to give more details about, like, what we wouldn't understand about your disability?
Okay. People with CAPD are really good at blending in and disappearing into the community. We tend to get diagnosed very late in life. I only got diagnosed 4 years ago, even though I've been lip reading almost my entire life to compensate. It's very challenging, but they estimate that as many as 1% of the population has some level of CAPD, has some level of the brain scrambling the auditory inputs. Okay, on a completely different note, phones are the bane of our existence. I have a cell phone, I have a flip phone, which I use constantly. I can't hear it ring. The only way I know that you're trying to get a hold of me is the fact that it is in my pocket. That's something that you're really never going to find on the paperwork, but if you want to write someone with CAPD, get to know someone with CAPD, and they will let you know that doorbells are evil. There's a good thing that police have the flashing lights in addition to the siren, otherwise we never get out of the way. We just don't navigate the world that way. Okay, we've got a little more time. Do we have some other questions?
What about other things which are off the bell curve, such as extremely intelligent or very strong but controlled strength? Those wouldn't necessarily be disabled. So, how do you say that something's off the bell curve but not a disability?
Okay, where we decide the bell curve sits is a social construct. If everyone is blind, they can consider the same person to be disabled. They can't function in the same way. People who have extreme intelligence, and I found out with some Nobel laureates, usually have something else going on too. Because whenever you have a really strong streak, you generally have something making up for it somewhere else. You just have to find it. And super strength, how many doors are you going?
And that's why it's best about control.
Well, that's a coping mechanism. Any disability, everyone has a coping mechanism. Whether it's a wheelchair to help navigate, whether it is the fact that everyone now knows I use my phone and so they email me instead. They're coping mechanisms, they're ways that we adapt the world. Okay, one more question.
Could you touch on either some additional tropes that have been problematic and overused, or maybe some resources of where to find those?
The disabled writer community is actually pretty diverse. So one of the first things you can do if you do not have a disability, or if you're someone with a disability and are just starting to put your toes into the water writing about your own experience, type in disabled characters and literature, and you will get a wealth of articles for people that are much more involved in the community than I am. I write in the... You can finish your sentence. I write in the community, but I mainly have a full-time job as a scientist. So writing has to be more of a hobby.
Great. If YA fiction is your thing, I've always had called Disability in Kidlit, where your entire staff is disabled writers who critique stories about disabled characters. So it's a really good resource. They have a lot of how-to sort of articles.
Say that again, what was it?
Disability in Kidlit. Kidlit.
All of them on Twitter too.
Okay. Fortunately, we have reached the end of our time. but I will hang out in the lobby for a little bit if you have any additional questions. And thank you so much for coming. Now that you have been here, you now have homework. I expect all of you to, even if you don't write a character who has a disability, to at least try to develop a character who does. Start opening the door. It's a whole lot of fun. Thank you again.